Episode 85, Learning to Better Serve Our Neurodiverse Brothers and Sisters at Church with Becky Fry.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and certified through the Life Coach School. Together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with the coach? Here we go.
We are raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to think that things should look a certain way when it comes to our families and church activities. But when a family has a child that has autism or is neurodiverse, following the script often becomes impossible in order to meet the needs of the child. For those who don't have children with a disability, there is a lot we can do to help these families feel welcome and a part of our congregation while exercising true Christlike love. Coach Becky Fry has personal experience being a parent of a child with advanced autism. On today's podcast, she discusses the struggles families of autistic and neurodiverse children have as they navigate their place in the church, and she shares helpful tips on how we can each reach out to these children as well as their families and better bring them into our congregations by encircling them with love and understanding.
Welcome to the podcast today, everybody. I'm so glad to have you listening, and I am especially glad that you get to listen to this conversation that I'm going to have with Coach Becky Fry. Becky, it's so nice to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So fun. Becky, I would love for you to introduce yourself. And as you do, would you also please share with us kind of how you got into coaching and share with us who you work with and all the things?
Okay. Yes. So I am Becky. I have been married for 19 years. I have two grown stepdaughters. So they're in their 20s now. And then I have a 15-year-old son and a 13-year-old son. My baby's 13. And my 15-year-old is profoundly autistic. He was diagnosed when he was 2.5. He was actually born at 28 weeks gestation. So he was 2 pounds when he was born. So he has been quite the journey. It's been the journey with him. But so at 2.5, he was diagnosed with autism. And, over the years, I've just been trying to navigate being a mom to a child who's different. He doesn't speak. So that's quite an adventure. Trying to learn to communicate with him. And, it was really just kind of overwhelming, to be honest, having this little boy who's different and not having, especially 15 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information. And so I didn't really know what I was doing, and it felt overwhelming a lot of the time. And so I'd go to therapy. I had a great therapist. I love therapy, but it wasn't really therapy what we did. We just, I vented and I tried to figure out how to parent my kiddo,
Right.
And so when I found coaching, it was like this light bulb came on, this is what I needed all those years. I needed to be able to talk about it, but also to be able to see my brain and my thoughts and my beliefs about my son. And all of those things that coaching brought into my life helped me so much that I decided to get certified and become a life coach. And that is exactly who I serve, moms of kids with autism, so that I can help them navigate that journey in a way that's meaningful. So that's what I do. I love it. I'm very passionate about it. And my business is called Unabridged Life Coaching. My son's name is Bridger, and unabridged means complete. So it's just very near and dear to my heart. But yeah, that's what I do. That's how I became a life coach.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. And I know there are so many people who will relate in some way to that. I think it's really interesting how you shared that you worked with the therapist, and I know it was certainly helpful and useful in many ways. But I think the thing that you said about coaching, and what I inferred from that, was not only was it helped you to become aware of what you were creating in the relationship with your son yourself, like what your part in it was, but it also helped you become intentional about what you wanted to create. So there was like this awareness and this intentionality that came out of it.
Yes, totally. And I love in coaching how you get to like pick the result that you want. Instead of just survival with my kiddo, it was like, how do I want this to be? And like, how do I get there?
Mhm.
So I loved that part of coaching.
Yeah, so good. Okay, so I'm certain that people relate to this story, and even if they have an autistic child or not, like there are things that make parenting challenging. Our kids are all different, and we have to figure out how to be their parent. Obviously, your situation is different, so is everybody else's, but tell me some of the things that you have found challenging as you parent a child with autism.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are so many different challenges, just like you said, just like with being a regular mom, like there's so many different challenges. But so I think like any mom of a child with autism is going to see different challenges, but for me, I think, communication has been a big challenge because my son doesn't talk. But even with higher functioning kids that do talk or have language, sometimes it's difficult for them to communicate their needs and their wants. And so communication is really tough. So another thing, I don't know if a lot of people know, but with autism, sleeping can be a real struggle. So my kiddo didn't sleep for the first 5 years of his life. Like he would be up in his room, just like running circles in his room. So if he didn't sleep, of course, I didn't sleep for 5 years. So I have this like really like challenging thing going on. And then I'm like completely exhausted.
Yeah, and nobody can, I mean, I don't know about, but no one functions, I don't think, when they're
Functioning
tired.
that way is crazy. It's crazy. So we were able to like find some medications and stuff. So he does sleep better now at 15, but some nights, like on occasion, he'll just be up all night. And so I'm up all night, so the sleep is a challenge. I think for a lot of moms too, the social part for their kids, because we don't like to watch our kids struggle to make friends or not be able to connect with people, or and sometimes kids with autism seem, because they're different, people think that they're, weird, or they don't want to be friends with them, like, and I mean, there's nothing more heartbreaking for a mom than to watch her child struggle with that, So I think that can be a real challenge. For me, my kiddo, he has like no fear. Like he doesn't have a sense of safety, or so like he would leave the house and just like wander away, or he might walk in front of a car or touch the stove, or like all of those things. It's just like constant, stress of and worry of like, how do I keep my kiddo safe? And I know, my child might be more severe than some kids, but I think, when you have a vulnerable child with a disability, you're always kind of worried for their safety, So I think that's a big stress. Church has been hard for us. It's been one of the most difficult challenges.
Which is so sad, because we like to think that church is our place of solace.
Right. And actually that is the biggest part of the problem, right? Because we're thinking like, our belief is like, we go to church for solace, for peace, for like to connect with heaven. And it's really been the opposite for us, like such a stressor, how do we get our kid to go and to be reverent, or to like to engage in some way? I mean, it's very, very challenging. and then it kind of messes up like how you thinking, like, why do I feel like this? I'm supposed to feel peaceful here, you know? So you
Yeah.
kind of like, there's then this judgment of yourself and like this shame, you know, guilt and shame for not enjoying church.
Right.
So it just kind of piles on a little bit. It makes it very difficult.
Yeah. It's just layer upon layer. It's not only are you dealing with your child, but then you're also then dealing with yourself and
Exactly.
the thoughts around that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you feel judgment? Did you feel judgment at church, or is it or other places?
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, like, we've been very blessed. I mean, we've just been in a few different wards. We've moved 3 times. And so, I mean, we've always just had such amazing leadership and people that are so kind and helpful. But even within that, you know, there have been comments. We know of comments that, you know, our child's very loud during sacrament. I think we're in a place at this point, and our child is severe enough that people know something's wrong with him.
Okay.
You know, so I think people have been very kind and loving and very supportive, but I've heard so way too many, you know, moms with broken hearts that have been judged for their child, because autism sometimes looks like a behavior problem,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not like a disability.
Mm.
And so our church, as lovely and as wonderful as it is, I think we have these expectations, you know? And so if a child is running out of the meeting or sitting under the chair or whatever, we judge, right? And we think like all the things that that parent needs to do, like we need to tell them or at least think it. And that's difficult. And the thing that I don't think people understand is like, sometimes just like walking into a big room, like if you go into sacrament and there's all these people, can be so triggering for someone with autism. Things like the bright lights can be physically painful for
Yeah.
someone
So
with
the
autism.
environment itself, not
The
even just
actual
the
physical
people.
environment can
Okay.
be like painful for the person, you know, for the
Mm-hmm.
child, the teen, the adults with autism. All
Mm-hmm.
those things can be affecting how they feel and make it difficult. And I mean, one of my favorite thoughts really about my son that I have to tell myself all the time is he's not giving me a hard time, he's having a hard time. And I mean, it's so true. And when you really believe that and understand that about someone with autism, it just like it takes the edge off, you know?
Yes.
It doesn't
And
necessarily,
it's just a tweak of words, right? It's just
yeah,
like two different words in that
yeah,
sentence make a huge difference.
yes. It means everything. And I think like at church, if we can remember that, it's so helpful. It just changes the whole feeling of how you can serve that person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know it does for me as mom.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I'm going back just a little bit, but I think it's interesting that you said that it's obvious that your child has, like, he's got some issues
A disability,
but
right?
a disability.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting the right words in my
Yeah.
mouth. But other kids, it might not be as obvious. And when that's the case, the judgment is greater when it's not as obvious. I think that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
That
I
we do
think it's
that.
true. I think we decide, you know, the story that we tell ourselves about that child's behavior is what we go with, and we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like such an important thing to remember, because I mean, and I even think about like, you know, how not only what would Christ do, but how would Christ feel about that child that is screaming in primary, or you know what I mean, or like running out the door? How would he feel, and how can we, like, what can we think to get ourselves to feel that way, instead of thinking I put all this time into like teaching this lesson or this song or whatever. And now all the other kids aren't getting it. I know. I mean, it's hard. And I don't want to negate, like, when you are dealing with the child, that struggles in that way, and it does affect other children. It is hard. So I don't want to negate that. However, it's the perfect opportunity for us to show Christ's love, right? It's like we don't even have to teach it. We can just show it and model it. Like my friend Kendra Huffman, she's on the directory as well. And she teaches I'll go first. Like she teaches this concept of I'll go first. And I love it so much because it's like, children, be kind to everyone. Adults, be kind to everyone. I'll go first. Let me show you how to treat this person that is struggling. And for teenagers, it even looks different and maybe even more behavioral, because if you have a higher functioning teenager with autism, like with autism, you have really concrete thoughts, right? It's like, it's more. So when you're trying to teach the spirit to someone who has really concrete thoughts, that can be really challenging. So when they're asking you questions, or maybe even feeling like they're not, that they're giving you a hard time, with their questioning or their disruption in the class, again, it's not them trying to give you a hard time. They're struggling to understand the concept that you're teaching.
They're like really trying to understand it. They're not, yes, that's really where it's coming from. It's coming from a pure place of curiosity and
not understanding. It doesn't make sense to them.
Right.
And so it feels behavioral, or maybe they're just not engaging at all because it doesn't make sense to them. So I think like one of the things that I've learned as a mom of a child with autism is like, you have to get creative. You can't teach things just the way you feel like you learned it or other people learn it. You have to be creative. You have to tap into the spirit, and you have to just like literally get creative in the way that you teach or approach these kids.
And it's hard to be creative if you're feeling frustrated with or annoyed with the situation. So if you can try to plan, I'm assuming if you can try to plan from a clean space rather than a frustrated space, it will be much different. You'll be able to tap into that creativity much easier if it's not coming from that place of, I have to do this because this kid is so hard.
Yes. And that's like, actually, it's so funny because I've been thinking about that as far as like, when I go to church, like when I take my son to church, on the days where I'm like, I'm not going to get anything out of this. I don't even know why I'm bringing him. Like, I'm going to be, I'm going to be taking care of him the whole time. I'm not going to hear a thing they say. Why do we even do this? When I go that way, I get nothing out of it. Right? I get nothing out of church. But when I think I'm going to go, Heavenly Father wants my kiddo at church, I'm going to serve him. I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to love him at church. When I'm coming from that place, I feel the spirit, whether I hear anything the speakers say or not, like serving him helps me connect with heaven. And that's why I'm at church personally, and so it's all in the way, exactly what you said. When you're feeling frustrated and upset, it's so hard to like feel that connection with Heavenly Father. It's just so much harder to do that.
I'm finding this so helpful on many ways. First of all, I haven't had a child with these disabilities, but anybody who's listening has had people in lessons, in our classes, in church, in our congregations that do. And so I find this so applicable in so many ways. And I'm so grateful actually to be having this conversation because I'm finding it really helpful for me. So thank you, first of all. I just needed to say, does the church, and I don't know, like, is there any sort of official standing? And I'm assuming there's not, but I guess I'm just asking this question in regards to autism or any neurodiverse?
There actually is a lot in the handbook. One of the things that I saw that I really liked is the handbook says that leaders and teachers should include members with disabilities in meetings, classes, and activities as fully as possible. Lessons, talks, and teaching methods should be adapted to meet each person's needs. So it does actually come right out and say that. I love that. As far as like ordinances go, it's just really loving. I love the way that church talks about it. To me, it feels really loving. For the ordinances, it says when considering whether to perform ordinances for a person who has an intellectual disability, the individual, his or her parents or guardians were applicable, and leaders counsel together. They prayerfully consider the person's desire and degree of understanding, and ordinances should not be withheld if the person is worthy and wants to receive them, and shows sufficient responsibility and accountability. So my son is not baptized. And I don't know if anyone hasn't experienced this. I don't know if I can really say what kind of heavy experience it is, but when my kiddo turned 8 years old, that's just all part of it, right? Your child turns 8 and they get baptized, and it's just all part of it. It's this milestone that you look forward to, and that's beautiful. Well, for us, we had to decide, what do we do? We're not sure what to do here. And I remember counseling with the bishop, my husband and I, and the bishop, and my husband said, if our kiddo isn't going to heaven, then no one is. And that's really touched me to the core of my soul. And I was like, that was the answer for me. The bishop agreed. My son was not able to indicate to us that he wanted to be baptized. If he does at some point, then we of course would revisit that, but we just didn't feel that he would understand what was happening. And I know that many of the moms that have kiddos with autism, they go through that same experience. And where you have a child that's higher functioning, it's a real issue to try and decide what's the right thing, for that child. Should they be baptized? Should they wait? Should they not be baptized at all? And what I really would like to say here is, if it's not your child, then just trust in the parents. Because that's another part where you just don't want to judge. Trust me, no one cares more than that mama who's trying to do the right thing. I think it's easy to look at people and think what they should do, but it's just not helpful.
I am feeling really drawn actually to this particular subject right here, because I think it beautifully exemplifies so many things that seem to be present right now in our church. Is that we have we get general direction from our authorities, right? Like being baptized when you're 8 years old. That's a general thing that we are taught. However, and President Nelson will say this too, we also believe in personal revelation. And so we give this general direction, and then every person then needs to make decisions personally with their Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother for themselves, because even though this is general, it doesn't mean that it also applies to everybody. And it goes with everything in the church. And I think it is so important for us to remember that.
Yes. And it's our responsibility as members to allow other people to have their agency.
Yes. And nobody has exemplified that more beautifully than you saying, from what we could tell, our son could not tell us that this is what he wanted. You are allowing that with him in any possible way that you can. And it's our basic foundational doctrine in the gospel is agency. And we have to respect that for everybody and not judge it, because just because it's general direction in the church doesn't mean that it applies to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're dealing with neurodiverse people, you have to allow for that flexibility for them to make it work how they can make it work. just because it doesn't look exactly like everyone else, their journey doesn't look exactly like everyone else's, they still belong there.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me how you would define neurodiverse. I hear that phrase a lot, and I have a general idea what it means, but I'm just curious how you would define that.
Yeah, I think that it's really just, it's a term for me that is coming up more often. I don't call my son autistic or that he has autism. There's a lot of controversy with different ways that you say it. I think neurodiverse is becoming the word that is the maybe more politically correct word, but it's just, it's just like my other children I call neurotypical. So it's where their brain works in a way that we would typically see, that kind of goes along with how most people think. Neurodiverse is anyone that their brain works differently, so
it's more of an umbrella statement that then would cover many different other
yes,
like autism would be covered under, would be underneath that umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. We did talk a little bit about judgment that we feel externally. Tell me, I'm certain there's internal judgment that comes there too. Like,
oh yes, of course.
Can we talk about that a little?
So. Yeah, maybe even more so. It just goes along with what we were talking about. We're raised in the church and it's supposed to look a certain way. And so when we can't like fit into that mold or fit our family into that mold, of course I want my family to get all dressed up for church and, go off to church all together and have a beautiful experience and be engaged and feel the spirit. And that doesn't work for us. Sometimes for us, it looks like one of us staying home with our son. If he's not going to be able, if he's having a tough day or whatever, then one of us needs to stay home with him. A lot of church activities or just actually going to church, like we always have two cars. One of us might need to leave. I mean, I wouldn't choose this. I wouldn't choose this. I would choose like the beautiful picture, right? Wouldn't we all, of like, just this is how church is supposed to feel and be. And I don't know. I think as moms, we blame ourselves when it's not the perfect scenario, then we think like, what did I do wrong? Or what could I be doing different? Or why can't I figure this out? I think that's where a lot of my personal judgment comes from. But, I'm so much better at that now that I have coaching. So I do recognize when I'm feeling that way, and I can definitely change my thoughts to, feel better and really recognize that this is exactly how Heavenly Father wanted our family to be, and who knows why, who knows like what that means for us, but it's all good. And we're just doing our best, and so I try not to let myself linger in the self-judgment too much these days.
I would think that self-compassion is so important because there are times, I'm certain, when and you alluded to this earlier, where it can really lead to, like, if you start to feel frustrated, then it also can lead to shame because you don't think that you should be feeling frustrated with your child or with you or with the situation. And if we could get to a place where we recognize, yeah, I feel frustrated, and then offering that self-compassion and it's okay, like, it's okay that I feel this way, then we're able to stop it from like becoming unproductive, right? Like adding that shame and pulling all of that into it, which doesn't help at all. But I think offering that self-compassion to ourselves makes it so much easier for us then to offer compassion to other people when we see them struggling in those situations as well.
Yes, so much. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, Becky, I have really appreciated this conversation today in so many ways. And I would love for you, before we leave today, to share with people where they can find more of you.
Oh, sure. My website is unabridgedlifecoaching.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Unabridged Life Coaching, or people can also just email me directly at Becky Fry at gmail.com. And yes, I would absolutely love anyone that's struggling to get to church with their autistic kiddo, or that's like not loving church right now. I would love to talk to them. Because it can be different. I promise it can be different. It is totally possible to love going to church and to feel peace at church. Again, no matter your circumstance.
I so appreciate that. And we will link to all of those things in our show notes so it'll make it easy for people to find you, because I know there are people that need you. And I am grateful to have you with us today and having you share this conversation, because it's been so good. Thank you so much, Becky.
Thank you for having me.
Love it. Have a great one, everybody. And we will see you next time. Thanks for being here. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.